Negotiating Ideas, a podcast about political thought on democracy and pluralism. My name is Omar Sadr, and I'm a research associate at the University of Pittsburgh Center for Governance and Markets. Today, I'm really excited to have Professor Ahmet Kuru with me. He is a director of Center for Muslim and Arab Studies and professor of political science at San Diego State University. Dr. Kuru is the author of Secularism and State Policies Towards Religion, the United States, France, and Turkey. He has also co-authored with Professor Alfred Stepan and the book titled Democracy, Islam, and Secularism in Turkey. Most recently, his book, Islam, Authoritarianism, and Underdevelopment, a global and historical comparison, has been translated in various languages across Asia and Africa. And today, we are going to speak about the dynamism between ulama, the clergy in Muslim world, and how they have contributed to underdevelopment and authoritarianism. First of all, welcome to Negotiating Ideas, and thanks for accepting the invitation.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
So for the sake of audience, you have spoken about this book. It's a very popular one, and you have spoken time and again and throughout different interviews and lectures that you have given. But probably if we provide a kind of a glimpse of the dynamics, the longer history of the Muslim world that you have observed and studied, the dynamics between the social class, ulama, and the political class, the state and the institution, how it evolved briefly, and why we are in this situation that we face, the crisis of democracy in the Muslim world. Most of the countries are authoritarian and they are underdeveloped. And what we can learn from history that you have studied.
So basically, it's a very important and broad question you are asking, but when we look at the world in general, we are in crisis. From United States to Europe, from Asia to Africa, out of 200 countries today, most of them are in trouble in different ways. And the reason why I focus on the Muslim majority cases is that I study religion and politics. My first book, as you say, was on secularism, particularly on Islam, state relations, Christianity, state relations. And as a Muslim myself, of course, I focus on the area that I know best, I am engaging primarily.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that the rest of the world is fine. No, Catholics are in crisis, Hindus, Jews, Christians, everyone have their own crisis in different sorts. One thing. But another thing, when the readers look at the introduction of the book, I compare the 50 Muslim majority countries in the world today with not only the Western countries, but also the rest of the world on certain issues, including women's rights. Muslim majority countries are worse in general, on average, than the rest of the world. On some other issues, like the theocratic dimension of authoritarianism, once again, Muslim countries are worse than the rest of the world. On some issues, they are better, but on many issues that as a political scientist I analyze, they need an awakening, a self-criticism, time to stop producing apologies, time to stop labeling the critical mind as Orientalists, Islamophobe, etc., especially people like myself, when I have a friendly critique from the internal sources, from the history of Islam. I find it very absurd that some reviewers says it is an Eurocentric Orientalist work. Either they didn't read it or they don't know what they are talking about. So this is the broad notion, and I'm an American Turkish. I've been in the US for 25 years, but I was born in Turkey. And in Turkey, everyone is grappling with the question of what has happened. Why the Ottoman Empire was so powerful, at least militarily, prestigious, then collapsed. then why Europe surpassed Muslims? That's why I start the book with an anecdote about my late father, Allah yarhamu, and how he discussed with a secularist general about the Muslims and their contributions to civilization. So this is something very personal for me. It's not simply an academic research. It is an academic.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have felt it personally on my daily life. And my primary focus is on to solve the problem of Muslim majority countries. That's why, as you said, there's a book about today, about the world problems, about 50 Muslim majority countries. But I had to go and analyze Muslim history for various reasons. A major reason is that Muslims, overall in general, at least the majority of us, appreciate history, take history seriously, and they don't listen people today. If I say things to Muslims about Ahmet Kuru, Professor of Political Science, 2022-5, most of them would not listen to. But if I tell them that this is Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Ahmed bin Hanbal, Shia leader from 8th to 12th century, that's what they do, that's what even Ghazali said, then they listen to. I think this is a wrong perception of appreciating, glorifying history and completely undervaluing present. It is mostly a result of imams preaching in the mosque wherever I go for Friday prayer, for Eid prayer. They always appreciate, glorify the history. Then I write the book and say, look, this is what history tells us. Would you listen to?
Yeah. But now that also is, it's not just about history. The political authority and religious authority of a certain class, the ulama, be it contemporary one, the ones that you listen to in mosque, or Abu Hanifa and Shafi in history, that tells us about which social class has an authority. You're right, as a professors or intellectuals, or probably with a secular mindset, we don't have the larger audience that we expect. So that is again something related to how religion is dominant, and how secularism has to a large extent failed. Secularism, a very generic term of it, not the version of France or Kemal Atatürk's version. The one which Alfred Stepan, for example, advocated, pluralist secularism, which allows Islam and religion and public sphere, but it doesn't allow monopoly of religion over politics. So
you rightly referred to Stepan twin toleration, and in my first book I also use passive secularism, in a way that a secularism that would not ban Muslim women's headscarves, that would not intervene people's private life.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in both of my books, as you rightly referred to, I emphasize the principle of separation. And the separation is not simply between ulama and the state, but also between state and corporations, state and academia. Today in the United States, we have a big crisis. This is exactly the point I'm emphasizing in my Islam book. Because look, now political authority intervene into universities. Political authority work together with corporations with no boundary, even physically, personally. We have Trump and Elon Musk combining politics and capitalism. These are all wrong. But in the Muslim achievement from 8th to 12th century was a certain level of separation between ulama, Abbasi and Umayyad Caliphate or the Emirate, and the Tajir or the merchant class, and certain philosophers, polymaths, had the chance to survive and flourish under this dynamism based on the separation. But after the 11th century, Muslims lost these precious things. Ulama became partner of state rulers. And as you said, the main argument and the concept in the book, ulama-state alliance, from history to present. And in both of your questions, you ask why is important to have a deep dive in history, because today in mosques, in Sufi tariqas, in religious Islamist political gatherings, they all say this is what Islam all about. Ulama state alliance cannot be dismantled because it is what Quran and the Hadith and Islamic history order Muslims to do. So ordinary Muslims have no chance to criticize this because it's imposed on them as a religious obligation. That's what I'm opening a new discussion to question what they are saying.
On the state-ulama alliance, which is the core thesis of the book, you propose that this alliance explains right after the fall of, the independence of ulama from 12th century onwards. But in contemporary modern times of ours, other studies, for example, Princeton University, Qasim Zaman's book suggests that ulama has been much more ambivalent towards state and political authority rather than completely endorsing it or having a straightforward alliance with them. And by ambivalence, he means that in certain cases, ulama has been cautious of the authority of state to control, for example, the religious affair or the madrasas, where they want to be autonomous. So when the state intervenes, they said, well, no, that's our sphere, so no more state authority. But once the ulama themselves take the state or capture the state, then they will enjoy maximum exercise of power, which turns the state completely to an authoritarian. For example, in case of Iran or, let's say, contemporary Taliban Afghanistan. So that sometimes they like authority of the state, but sometimes when it undermines their own autonomy, they don't want it, so they push back. So do you think that still we can explain this by that thesis of state-ulama alliances?
So, of course, in a huge geography from West Africa to Indonesia, from the Balkans to Bengal, Muslim systems show variation. And this variation helps us understand why some Muslim majority countries achieve to be democratic and more open. One example is Senegal in West Africa, the other is Indonesia, Southeast Asia, then the Albania, Kosovo, Bosnia in Europe. And when we look at these cases, they all show very weak ulama state alliance, very weak madrasa chain influence. Instead, Indonesia became Islamicized very late, and the colonization came very early. They never had ulama state madrasa waqf system of Middle Eastern model. West Africa, Senegal, and some others have very strong Sufi elements, coexistence with non-Muslims, etc., more eclectic. Definitely no Middle Eastern type ulama state alliance. You can say the same for some Balkan cases. That's how democracy flourished. Whereas this ulama state alliance first emerged in Central Asia, Iran, Iraq in the 11th century, then spread to Syria, Palestine, Egypt in the 12th, 13th centuries. And the best institutionalization was visible in the Ottoman Empire and the Safavids. Ottomans defined themselves Sunni ulama state alliance, as Safavids produced Shia ulama state alliance. But the model wasn't simply fixed to Middle East and North Africa in the narrow sense, because after the publication of my book, I see my Pakistani friends telling me that we call this military mullah military alliance. It's very almost the same thing what you mean ulama state alliance. It's the core of Pakistani politics. Bangladesh, now they have a revolutionary moment, people discussing the role of Islam and ulama in politics. They say your book is very relevant. In Indonesia, despite the fact that I appreciate their democracy, they also now has multiple crises now, and there is a possibility of ulama state alliance emerging. In Malaysia, there is definitely an ulama state alliance, and they just banned my book last month.
I got to know that.
Islamic committee decision saying that this book is against Ash'ari Maturidi. So I am Maturidi. I am from a Hanafi school. When I was there, I challenged this narrow-minded ulama and Islamists in Malaysia, saying that come to talk to me. You make me more Turkish Ottoman nationalist, saying that how dare you define me as against Sunni Islam, because my ancestors, Ottomans, spread Sunni Islam everywhere. You come to teach me what is Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah? It's very offensive. And they say, I would confuse Muslim people. They say, you can talk to university but not mosque because you will confuse them. So you treat mosque people as children. You think they are not smart enough to understand what is good, what is right, and they always need your protection. Then you are like Catholic Church of medieval times, not even today's Catholic Church, treating the people as children that unable to read and understand holy texts, always need the guidance of ulama. But the problem is that in Catholicism, they build a theory of clergy. In Sunni Islam, clergy does not exist. That's their problem.
Sure.
Because Ruhban or clergy or religious class exists in Shia Islam, not Sunni. Sunnis believe that after the death of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, there is no holy person giving the message. Therefore, they reject the idea that son-in-law of the Prophet Ali, then his grandsons Hassan and Hussein have a divine message. They say, no, we elect Abu Bakr, then Omar, then Osman, then Ali. It's based on community decision. God did not give any message after the Prophet. So, and there is no clergy theoretically in Islam. But in fact, reality, you and I know, they exist. They now are ruling Afghanistan with Taliban. They are having Grand Mufti office in Egypt, Al-Assad in Egypt, in Turkey, Diyanet. Of course, in Iran, they have a semi-theocratic regime. In Pakistan, Sharia court. In Malaysia, many official positions, and they earn money by being ulama and having the religious authority, despite the fact that the Quran says that follow those who are not receiving money in exchange of their religion, right? So there's religious authority have many problems. They should rethink their position. They should look at how Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal was working in textile sector. Abu Hanifa was a merchant himself. They refused to receive the gifts and money from the state authorities. That's what I'm calling for rethinking.
I will have one question on religious authority and ijtihad, but before that, about the state ulama alliance and how the state has been so far able to control the religious affair in Muslim world. One comparison, if I can make, between, for instance, Egypt on one hand, which has relatively strong state, and Afghanistan and Pakistan on the other hand, with weak states. Do you consider the time era where nation state as a modern entity emerged in most of these societies as a factor influencing the relationship between ulama and the state? Now, let me explain it by these two cases. In Egypt, most of these relationship between the state and ulama goes back to pre-modern era of Ottomans. And when modern state came into being, already there were institutions. On the other hand, in Pakistan and Afghanistan, there wasn't a strong institutions to regulate religion and ulama before the modern state. So, for example, in Pakistan, it was Ayub Khan for the first time who came up with he proposed that, well, we have to have certain institutions to regulate madrasas, mosques, because as far as these other Muslim countries do. Now, most recently, how do we see difference? And during the COVID, Egypt was able to shut down all the mosques and enforce those regulations. Pakistan and Afghanistan couldn't do it because the ulama resisted and didn't allow the state to do it. So now the question would be how, first of all, the particular era that nation state emerged influences this dynamic, and secondly, how state capacity matters, and in our time, like weak states doesn't have that capacity to control ulama.
So fascinating comparison. Thanks for bringing it on the table. As I said, of course, there are many variations based on multiple factors. So if we focus on this comparison, Afghanistan, you know better than me, that has so negative historical trauma: Soviet invasion, then American invasion, then there was a civil war, tribalism, of course, weak state. But Pakistan and Egypt, if we focus on the two, first of all, it's much easier to control Egypt because there is no Egypt in reality, because 95% of the territory is desert. We are talking about only 5% of the territory you see in the map. And it's all about Nile River. Of course, I am exaggerating. People may find the towns here and there, but look, it's Cairo, Alexandria, maybe 35 million people there, then the rest around the Nile River. So geographically easier to control in comparison to Pakistan and Afghanistan, which are more mountainous areas, open to Indian Ocean, and then big cities, and the subcontinent is huge. I was in India last month, and you and I talk about Delhi. So when I talk to people about India, they say it's very decentralized. It's unlike Egypt. So India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, over 1 billion people in a vast geography, historically very decentralized. Egypt has been very centralized since the time of ancient pharaoh, because of, as I said, the centrality of Nile River and the distribution of water controlled by some bureaucracy, and economy and everything controlled by bureaucrats. This is a central state for very long history of Egypt, where even before Islamic times. Whereas in the subcontinent, much bigger geography and population, and mountainous areas hard to control, multiple rivers and everything, make the state weaker or decentralized. And then now in Pakistan, the military is in a big trouble because they gave up too much. They co-opted with Islamists and jihadists during the Afghan jihad and for various other reasons. So now they have a hard time to control Waziristan in the north, and then the radical elements in the country. Overall, it's a much difficult situation. So modernity, yes. Modern state important, yes. But modern state is a spectrum of capacity, weak and strong. And the ulama, wherever they take advantage of the weakness of state, make themselves more powerful. That's what these cases are telling us. And the example is very good, crystallizing how Egyptian state, despite certain challenges, still having more authority than the Pakistani state on certain issues.
Definitely, and you spoke about how ulama misuses this sometimes the weakness of the state. But on the other hand, how about the state as an institution? So an evolving pattern since 1960s, 70s that you discuss in one of the other recent articles has been increasing Shariaization of society and state in Muslim world. And that includes states establishing particular form of institutions like ulama councils, shura ulama. You have it in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in North Africa, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco. Most of these, they have established in various forms. Some of them large as 3,000 people in that council. Some of them like few hundred or few people who are close to monarch or the prime minister or the president. The state basically does this kind of thing in order to earn religious legitimacy. So again, it's politicization of religion. So what would be your take on that? If this is, of course, this is a wrong way to administer and regulate religion, what will be an alternative institutional framework for a state to engage with religion and the ulama?
So basically, every country will find its own contextual, systematic, institutional solution to the problems. But we should agree on principles. So first of all, if the principle is the flourishing of society, people's well-being and happiness, freedom should be on the agenda, giving some freedom to people. Of course, rulers everywhere are unwilling to give freedom. That's why people demand. We have American Revolution, French Revolution, and constant resistance. And balance of power, therefore, is key. Balance of power is key for happiness and freedom of the people in order to contain the tyrannical ambition of ruling class. Balance of power is important for the protection of people's property rights and other rights, and balance of power is needed for justice, adalah, the key concept for Muslims.
Sure.
But for principles and theories of Islam-state relations reject the notion of balance of power. From the time of Mawardi all the way to Ibn Taymiyyah, there is an obsession from history to present. There is an obsession of unity. The theory of caliphate is based on one man, came to post, not elected or can be elected, doesn't matter, and stay in power as long as he doesn't die or become a kafir, an infidel.
Yeah.
So there is no balance of power. So you may say that don't judge Mawardi and Ibn Taymiyyah because it's anachronistic to judge them with modern times conceptualization. But then if you accept that these guys are historical, we should not judge them with our own concept today. Why are you bringing their ideas today as if they are fresh ideas? No, these are medieval ideas. The notion of unity of religion and politics, unity of a caliph, unity of a single leader, this is a very bad idea. But this is an embedded idea. You see how people in Turkey, some of the religious people like Erdogan, because for them he unifies religion and politics. Even in America today, at least a third of society appreciate how Trump unify everything. This is a very bad idea because power should be divided. There should be balance of power. There should be separation of spheres and social classes as we start the discussion. There should be separation between religious, political, economic, academic classes. And then the unification of power is making things worse. In the two examples you mentioned, Pakistan and Egypt, the military, armed forces try to control economy. In both cases, especially in Egypt, the armed forces have multiple economic companies producing tomato paste and other things. And then they try to control academia and religion.
Mm-hmm.
And this obsession with control produces corruption, injustice, inefficiencies. And therefore, what I'm trying to say is that in principle, first of all, or religious views, political ideology should accept that unification, homogenization, centralization are bad things. We need diversity, we need balance of power, we need differentiation in order to reach justice, adalah.
Sure. Now, one other actor that we add, of course, in the book you speak about three actors, the ulama, the Sufis, and Islamists.
Yeah.
But I'm more interested in variation of behaviors and incentives that each of these actors have, particularly like between ulama and Islamists. Again, another example that we give from Pakistan would be the very famous Taqi Usmani, who is madrasa trained, but he was also appointed as a federal judge of the Islamic court. On one hand, and Maududi, which is very prominent Islamist. For Maududi, an Islamic state and Islam, both of them are same. Basically, an Islamic state is literally Islam itself. But he doesn't envision any rule for ulama for an state to be Islamic. Literally, ulama doesn't have to be part of the state. But on the other hand, Taqi Usmani, who comes from this ulama background and madrasa, he has a different version of the state, where, for example, even his theory is that if Islamist parties or Islamic parties wants to make an alliance with secular parties, they should do it in their own terms and their own, the all kind of religious agenda that they have. Now we have these two competing ones. So one can see the same thing in Syria, for example, between ulama, which was close to Bashar al-Assad, the Mufti, and those the Islamists on the other hand. So do you see that we have to treat these two groups differently? The book's primarily on ulama, not much on Islamists, but how do we treat the Islamists now?
So basically, they have some disagreements, but at the bottom line, they all are for Sharia. So Mawdudi was a madrasa-trained member of ulama, but he hid or never explicitly emphasized his madrasa-trained ulama background. Instead, he has been known as an ideologue, journalist, author, because at that time, it was not good to be ulama. It was 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Modernization, secularism were very influential. Not anymore. Today, if Mawdudi had lived today, he would emphasize that I am a member of ulama madrasa train. He wouldn't project himself as an ideologue, because at the time, Marxist ideology, communist, capitalist ideologies were very prominent, and he said, I am the ideologue of Islamism. Usmani and the Mawdudi are almost the same, because they are both ulama, and Mawdudi had more Islamist portrayal because of the condition of his time. But what is the project? Project is Islamization. Who would do the Islamization? Who knows the best Islamization? The most unapologetic and explicit claim came from Khomeini. Although Khomeini was a Shia, he was influenced by Mawdudi and Sayyid Qutb, and he wrote essays combined to define what he means Walayat al-Faqih. Walayat al-Faqih basically means the tutelage of, or the guardianship of the faqih, ulama, with legal expertise, where he says that all the project about Sharia, who knows the Sharia best? Ulama. Faqih. That's why faqih should rule. If the Prophet Muhammad lived today, can he change the Sharia rules? No. If Imam Ali lived today, can he make the punishment of adultery rather than 100 strike? Can he make it 99 strike? No. That's why faqih are more important, maybe as important as the Prophet and Imam Ali. So this is I don't want to say something very negative, but at the minimum, this is the very childish understanding of law. So many doesn't understand anything about law, because is it all about the punishment of adultery, whether 100 struck or 101 or 99? So you think there is no agency of the Prophet? If Prophet lived today, he would just memorize the madrasa textbooks and repeat them. So this is your understanding of Prophet Muhammad with zero agency. Even Imam Ali, as a Shia, your understanding of Imam Ali with zero agency. No, this is completely wrong, because everyone is an agent, especially these important leaders like the Prophet, Ali, etc. If they see a context, they make a different judgment, because law, it lives with society. It's not so simple of how many strikes, 100 or 99. As I said, it's a very childish understanding of law. It's very utopian. And then the three groups, the ulama, Islamists, and the Sufis, there are overlapping. Qaradawi, very famous Qatari, Egyptian, former Muslim Brotherhood, was seen as the most important Sunni scholar of law, even more important than Osmani in Pakistan, right? Qaradawi was both an alim and ulama member and Islamist, Ikhwan Muslimin member. They asked him to be their leader twice and he declined. And Khomeini was also a member of ulama and Islamist. Some of them can be Sufi Islamists and ulama, but at the bottom line, their understanding is about a Sharia state.
Yeah.
And who knows the Sharia best? Ulama. That's why when Ikhwan Muslimin came to power in the Arab Spring in 2013, they made a new constitution where they say that Sharia is the basis of Egyptian law, and the Council of Ulama of Al-Azhar decide what Sharia is. So normally, Ikhwan Muslimin has been targeted by Al-Azhar. But this Islamist Ikhwan Muslimin at the end gave entire authority to their former enemy, Al-Azhar, ulama, because ulama knows Sharia, that's the system.
Yeah. And so this brings me to the question that I wanted to ask about ijtihad. So it's about Shariaization is about how to promote or codify, in certain cases, Sharia. For example, Taqi Usmani, he accepts that Islam could be codified. But at the same time, he also gives this version of which is currently now ruled through Taliban in Afghanistan. Basically, they do not codify it. They directly apply Sharia. So which means proof of burden will be on the court and the judge to identify which Sharia rules and then apply it. Now, in both of these two cases, ulama claim a complete absolute monopoly over religious knowledge. Anyone who is out of ulama category, they don't have the authority to do ijtihad. Now, you said, I think you discussed this in the book, and let me hear it from you. Do we have to expand or redefine what do we mean by ijtihad? As far as we do not reconceptualize the concept of ijtihad and who has the authority, ulama will misuse this authority in a number of years.
So they came to power in countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Pakistan. And look, none of the three is now a functioning system. Saudi Arabia is completely trying to change everything. And they are putting Wahhabi ulama into prison. And then the MBS says that the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, this is a country established by Saudi dynasty, not in alliance with Wahhabi Saudi. No, he said, Wahhabi clergy is not the primary agent. We, the Saudis, we create Saudi Arabia. And the system clearly not working anymore with the imagination of Wahhabi utopian Islamist Sharia system in Saudi Arabia. So Iran is a working system? No, it's a completely broken system. We can discuss hours and hours. And Pakistan is a failed state. And other than blasphemy law, they don't have anything else consistent that they are defending. So this is the problem on the table. Either they will reform the notion, or the alternative is complete secularization of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, Habib Bourguiba, Baas regime. This is the dilemma for the Muslim world. People want Islam be respectful, play some role, but the ulama's theory is so rigid that it excludes the people.
Yeah.
Anyone who is not ulama. And then what can you rule? So Catholic Church defends such a system for centuries. At the end, now they are ruling only Vatican, which is smaller than a city-state. So because the system is utopian, no one takes Catholic Church legal system seriously anymore. So ulama will either reform or there will be another very strong secular movement. And I don't like either way, authoritarian Islamism or authoritarian secularism.
I would say the prospect for a strong secular trend is very minimal in the Muslim world. And as you discuss in one of the papers, what we observe now is a kind of synergy between demagogues, populists on one hand, and Islamists. The case of Turkey, for example. So even the Taliban in Afghanistan, not much similar to Turkey, but Taliban represent both forms of extreme radical Islam, aligns with very village localized tribal culture, which is again based on that some sort of populism. It's not democratic. That electoral democracy doesn't exist, but they continuously refer to culture in order to deny women right to education. It's Afghan culture and so on and so forth. So as far as this, as you started at this talk conversation with what's going on around the world. So even in the United States, it's Christian nationalists coming with the books altogether. So it's a global trend, and probably it will take a number of years to transform from this phase. And political economy matters, as you discuss it, and the dynamics between ulama and state in the book.
No, that's a very good point. And we are coming to the end of the conversation. I wish I had a more optimistic note. But for the next 5 to 10 years, the religious forces around the world will stay in power by bringing together nationalist alliance, some populism, definitely, and anti-liberal views, which are now very popular in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
But eventually, in the next 20, 30 years, the religious forces will be weakened. Once the populist projects failed, people will take all three responsible: populist, nationalist, religious. And there will be time for being accountable. And in the Muslim world, the fact that even Taliban and others try to use nationalism, populism as a source of power and legitimacy show that the Islamist project itself collapses. In Turkey, in Egypt, they only stay in power with some nationalist rhetoric and populism. Islamism was a very strong ideological moment in 1980s, 90s, 2000, not anymore.
Yeah.
And we see now an amalgamation of right-wing populism, and neither of the two, of course, a democratic force, religious or populist. But we have to wait and see. But anyone who wants an open society, a democratic system, a just system, should really work on providing an alternative. And let me say this, that the book we are discussing, Islam, Authoritarianism, and Underdevelopment, try to provide a very optimistic message that Muslims had enough in their early history as source of inspiration to create open societies, dynamic, competitive societies, rather than inward-looking societies ruled by conspiracy theories, xenophobia, etc. That's why the history of Islam, early Islam, give us a hope about the future.
Sure. Well, and with that hope, I really thank you for the time that you take out from your busy schedule to speak with me and with the audience.
Thanks for your excellent question. I was very happy to have this conversation.
You're welcome, Professor. And it was a pleasure recording this episode with Dr. Kuru. Thanks for our listeners for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed listening, and definitely you will be encouraged to read the book. Please make sure to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your circle of friends on social media. Looking forward to talking to you in the next episode.